Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
I pose a question as you join us today. Can you write a book? Did you ever think about writing a book? Do you think you could ever write a book? Fiction, nonfiction, whatever it may be. I haven't even introduced them, but I'm going to just ask this question to her, Rin. Did you ever think you could write a book when you were younger?
I think that there was a while when I was really young, like 6 or 7 or 8, where I was like, this is just a thing that everyone does. Like, I read a lot and I was like, one day a book is just going to happen to me. Like, one day I'm just going to wake up and I'm going to write a book and it's going to be perfect the first time and it's going to be done. And then I got a bit older and I was like, that's never going to happen. And then I was like, well, maybe. So, yes and no.
Wow. It's almost as if when you were younger, and thank you for your answer. It's almost as if you manifested it as a child, maybe when you were younger. And to me, that says that young, fresh curiosity, anything is possible. We all should be living that way as adults at all times. She is Rin Sangart. She's written a very interesting horror-ish novel. So we're going to dig into that today. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And the gentleman that helped her along the way, the publisher of her book, NFB Publishing, up in Buffalo, New York, Mark Pogodzinski, is back with us. How's it going, Mark?
Good. How are you today?
Very well. The name of the book is called Lovely. Do I have that right? Just Lovely?
Yeah.
Is that the title? Okay.
Yes.
Interesting story. And it's funny that we were talking about when you were younger and how you thought, I'm going to write a book. I can do it one day. It's about somebody who is younger, right?
Yeah.
Tell us.
So the main character of the book her name is Heather Strand, and she's like 16, 17 years old in this small town in the middle of nowhere. And kind of all she wants to do is to get out of this town and just leave. And then just sort of stranger and stranger and more sinister things start happening in the town.
So did she want to leave just because it's time for me to go? Maybe I'm not happy with my family situation and I'm going to go off on my own. Was that the mentality of her in the beginning?
Yes, but I also think it's a very common feeling in sort of children and also young adults when it's just sort of being like, I know there's more out there. Like, this can't be it. There has to be more out there. And just sort of that feeling of just wanting to experience anything else.
I'm an old adult and I think that.
I think it's a feeling that really stays with you. I think it's a feeling that you sort of discover when you're sort of a teenager, and then it sort of stays with you, just the idea of just there being more out there and just wanting to find something different and something else, and just the feeling of wanting to leave.
Do you believe that in broadly, you personally, life in general, that there's always something more out there? Yes, we're grateful. Everything is good, but there's more out there. I'm going to keep searching. There's opportunities, there's learning experiences, things I can share. Is that your mentality?
I think there's like an innate human curiosity to just sort of always seek out more and try more and just sort of see what the next best thing is. So I think that, yeah, that's just a part of the human condition, I believe.
Well, I think it's also a condition of being younger. It's that curiosity, which I believe you never want to lose as you get older. It's almost just like you're like a kid at heart. It kind of seems that way.
Yeah.
The book takes some turns and twists along the way. It's not as easy as I guess Heather thought to just get up and go. Tell us what happens.
So when she comes back to Lovely, the book starts with her coming back to Lovely after a time away. And her closest friend, his younger brother, has been missing and has now been found dead. So it's this whole sort of turmoil of like a town reacting to this loss, and especially the loss of a child and this stuff. And then also just the fact that the local police tell them that it was just an animal attack and there's nothing they can do to help them. And the sort of idea of fundamentally knowing that that's wrong and not trusting the people in charge. And then having to deal with that as someone who is a young person doesn't have any kind of power or sway in that dynamic.
Lovely. Why that name?
It's what I named the town. And I also just think it's sort of the perfect irony of growing up in a place where it's supposed to be idyllic and it's supposed to be your childhood home and it's supposed to be perfect, and it's just not. And also just that feeling of just that, the knowledge that something here is wrong and that something isn't quite right.
Do you feel that Heather in her journey obviously realized that, but broadly, everybody in the town thought, this is a great town. We love here. It's lovely. It's lovely.
It's
But
lovely,
she really saw
obviously.
it for what it is.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a perfect description of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Is this your first book?
Yes, it is.
Is there a piece of Heather in you?
I think so. I think it's sort of that emotion and that feeling that I do feel of wanting to run away and feeling like things aren't right and wanting to feel something different. So I think so, yes.
So when you were writing it, I want to get in your head as a writer and a fresh writer. Um, did you change things up along the way? Like, would you type something? I don't know your process. Some people physically write stuff down, and that's all good. I don't judge. I'm a geek. In terms of technology, I write stuff. I got post-it notes all over the place. There's scientifically proven too that when you physically write, it does something. Did you change it like as along the way? Nah, I want to go back. I want to change that. You get to a certain point, it's like, nah, I'm going to tweak that a little bit. Did you go back and forth, kind of wrestle with your mind on it?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I definitely thought that when I first started writing it, I was like, blood sacrifices is going to be a huge part of it. And then in the actual book, there are, I think, no, if maybe only one blood sacrifices. So there were definitely bits that I thought were going to happen that didn't. And there were definitely times when I would write a scene and I didn't know how the scene was going to slot in. So sometimes I'd have like a moment of inspiration and I would write out a whole scene or like a whole section or like a thing that happened and I had no idea how or why it was going to slot in. And there were times when that scene got discarded absolutely because it ended up there just wasn't a place for it. So yeah, definitely a lot of going back and forth and a lot of trying to connect missing puzzle pieces and realizing that some of those puzzle pieces don't fit at all instead of like a linear structure is a lot of my process.
Hmm. Rin, did you have moments where you're writing, and maybe you did a whole chapter in one night, whatever it might be, or maybe a big chunk of story, and then you look back shortly thereafter and say, where did that come from? That came out of me? How did I even do that?
I had a really surreal moment where I'd written, I think like two-thirds of it, and I went back to reread it, and it was a lot of the time when I write, a lot of my process was I would try and do like an amount of words a day, just to get something down. And it got to a point when I was like two-thirds of the way through writing it, when I went back to reread it, and I reread the first like 5 pages, and I was like, this is great. Did I do this? I was
Right?
like, this is awesome. Like, was this me?
I've done it too. Like I'm not a writer, don't claim to be, don't know if I ever will. But I've gone back, looked at proposals or just pieces of copy, whatever it might be. I do marketing, so I could have wrote a radio commercial, TV commercial, whatever it might be, and then I look back, I'm like, dude, where was your head at that time? That's good. And then
I,
I don't think I could ever do that again. Never say never, but I don't know where the inspiration came. Mark, when you first looked at what she presented, what was it? Was it a finished product? Was it a manuscript? Was it maybe a synopsis? What happened, when you worked with her?
Um, it started off, she had the full manuscript ready to go. And when we read through it, there was hints of Stephen King, where she takes something nice like a small town and ruins it, as Stephen King does.
Hmm.
And then there were also elements of Shirley Jackson, where everyone overlooks the obvious darkness that's underneath the everyday life. So there was a lot of that, although her prose was a little bit, and again, a compliment tighter than Stephen King's, as she could tell the story in, 200 less pages than sometimes his books run into. But she still has that, it seems okay, yet beneath it, there's something mysterious, something dark, and something worth investigating. And as she said, I like the idea of the journey of young people, even older people, striking out, trying to find something new. And I like what she said, searching for something that's more. And I think that was a big part of the book too.
Rin, when you were writing it, it gets dark. Did you wrestle with, like you said, the blood sacrifices? Did you wrestle with how dark should I make it? Did you dial it back? Did you amp it up?
I don't think I ever really d dialed it back. I don't think I ever really wrestled with that. I think I'm a huge horror fan and have been a huge horror fan since I was very young. So I don't think there were any points where I was ever like, oh, is this getting too dark? I think there were some moments when I was like, I could make this a lot more gory or a lot more worse, but I was like, at what point is it just gratuitous and it's just unnecessary? Like, I think I wanted to stay very true to the story and very true to the characters and the elements of realism that are there, however small they are, instead of just having it descend into sort of spirals of badness.
What's your inspiration? Be it books, movies, TV shows along the way. What would you say that kind of crafted your storytelling, your inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up reading just anything and everything I could get my hands on. I think I read every single one of R.L. Stein's Goosebumps books by the time I was like 9 years old. So no, that was a huge sort of inspiration and a huge motivation. And then I read a lot of Stephen King growing up. Stephen Graham Jones is one of my favorite authors right now. He writes a lot of horror that's set in like sort of small towns and more rural communities. So I really love that. So definitely books and films are huge inspirations for me. And then I think just a lot of the things I draw on are real events where a thing happens and then I make it more horrifying, or I sort of play into a darker thing that could have happened or a dark alternative. So yeah.
I want to get in your head as a horror fan. When you're watching a movie and as certain scenes come up, do you still find yourself looking at it and going, whoa, or feeling it, empathetically for the characters, or does it kind of just roll off your shoulder now?
I think I definitely still feel it. And I think that part of it is the thing I enjoy is feeling that emotion, where it's like it's horror and it's terrifying and it's sort of a safe way to experience that terror. And it's sort of the catharsis of it that I enjoy. Where I don't think that I don't like horror because I'm numb to it. I like horror because it makes me feel something. And that's the part that I enjoy of it.
What is that feeling? Is it the surprise? Is it well, I don't watch a lot of horror. When I do, I feel that. I'm like, well, I feel for the characters. Truth be told, I'm very empathetic. That's a good thing. It's a bad thing. So I wonder what it's like for somebody like you.
I think I'm also very empathetic, and I think it's a different kind of fear. It's a different way to experience fear in a way that there's no real danger. And
Okay.
it sort of feels like you're, for lack of a better word, like microdosing fear, where it's not that straight up all right terror. It's a smaller part of it where it can become enjoyable.
Thank you for saying that. I totally got that. I
Yeah,
really do. Because it's like instead of consuming the whole meal, you're having a spoon, another spoon here,
exactly.
and it's
Yes.
it's doable. Um, Mark, what do you think about the story overall? And do you think there could be a sequel to this?
Absolutely. I grew up with horror movies too. And as you mentioned before, like a good horror story has to have an empathetic character. You're gonna want that character to survive. I think bad horror movies is when you root for the bad guy. When you're like, oh, I
Hmm.
find campers to be incredibly annoying at Crystal Lake, and I hope Jason just wipes them out as quickly as possible. A good horror movie like Rin's book, you got to root for the person to survive, and I think that's where the inspiration with Stephen King comes from because, again, the town of Derry, Pennywise, uh, it. I think you have those characters that you empathize with, as you both said, and that's what makes a good horror story.
Hmm.
And again, being raised on horror movies from 70s, 80s, 90s, you get to the point where you're like, I really hope these annoying teenagers meet their end quickly. And you don't see that with Ren's book. You're rooting for the protagonist. You want them to survive. And when she puts them through those paces in the book, you're right there with them. And I think that's the strength of that book. And that's what makes for bad horror. When you have, as she said, she could have gone deeper and more graphic. You write that for shock value, but the characters, you simply don't care what happens to them.
I'm learning a lot today. I got to tell you. And next time I watch a horror flick, I'm going to be looking at the characters and see which ones I'm rooting for to really determine whether it's a good story or not. Wow. I never thought of it that way. And yeah, it seems like a delicate balance where you have to go between balancing the horror, the shock factor, and then balancing the character like Heather. if you've well established that character and we feel for them, you don't need so much of the horror shock value because Heather's moving it along. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's absolutely it. Yes.
Hmm. Would you do a sequel? Have you thought about it?
I haven't thought about it a lot. I think that I would really need inspiration to strike for it because I think that when I started writing Lovely, very quickly, even if I didn't know what the story was going to be, I knew who Harold was as a character. I knew what the setting was, and I knew like some themes I wanted to put in. I think I'd need inspiration to strike again like that in order to write a sequel. I'd be open to it, but I feel like I'd want to really want to do something with it instead of just writing it because I didn't know what else to write.
Would you do a totally, if not a sequel, would you write a totally different book?
Yes, absolutely. I want to keep on writing. I am currently working on small drafts and things and nothing substantial yet, but yes,
Wow.
I would absolutely want to keep writing.
What are you doing when you're not writing?
I go on a lot of hikes. I do a lot of nature walks. I currently live in a really beautiful place,
Oh,
so
you
that's
mean a lovely place?
dear God, no, I hope not. I can't deal with mimics. I have too much on my plate.
It is kind of interesting when you think of, the word lovely and how it's not. So no pun intended, or maybe I love it. It's super cool. When you were writing Rin, were you, and maybe you still are, thinking that this could be a movie, this could be a series on Netflix? Has that entered your mind?
Not in any kind of like rational, realistic kind of way, but I do think that a way that, and part of this is growing up watching a lot of horror films. Part of the times when I'm writing a scene, I do imagine it in my head as if it was a film or a thing that was actually happening. And I think that that helps to visualize it a lot of being like, where would I want the camera's focus to be on? And that's the thing I describe in a little bit more detail. Or like, what would I want the audience to see, but not necessarily be able to like infer like a character's emotion? And then that's the thing I write about. So I do think that there's an element of being like, if I had to convert this into a script, how do I start sowing the seeds for that now?
Hmm.
One point.
Without giving anything up within the book, is there a certain scene, situation that you really, really, really like and or are proud of, or are they all kind of the same in terms
There
of
are
your
absolutely
affinity for them?
no, there are absolutely scenes that I prefer to other scenes. There are absolutely scenes that I wrote a few times and I was like, I wrote once or twice and I was like, this is perfect, I've done it. And then there were other scenes that I struggled with and I still had to fight. But yeah, there's this one bit about, and no spoilers, but about this character named Lucy and kind of her journey. And that was the bit where I wrote that pretty much all in one night and didn't edit it a ton after that. So definitely bits that I enjoy a lot more than others.
Do you feel a certain type of excitement when you're writing in that anything is possible? You could take it in any direction you want. Is there a certain type of like freedom that comes with that?
I I think my process is kind of the opposite, where it kind of feels like this idea is I'm just sort of transcribing something that's happening. Like I get like a burst of inspiration and it feels like I see the scene entirely and then I just write down what happened instead of being like, and there are definitely choices I make and there are definitely decisions I make. But a lot of the times the really big scenes that I really love are things that just something feels like it clicks and it comes together and I'm just describing it rather than
That's really
sort of
cool. I got to tell you, I've never heard that described before, where it's almost like you got to download. Oh, this is what happened. It's
yes.
fiction,
And
but
then it's
in your
just
mind, this
let's
and
go for it.
you just got to commit it to a screen or paper where I just need to recount what happened. And maybe in the download that a couple of things weren't crystal clear. So you needed to maybe embellish a little bit to get the
Yes.
story done. Wow.
Mhm.
On the editing side, Mark, what needed to be done with what she gave you?
I think you can tell, like talking to her, that this is pretty polished when we got it. And again, we're not going to change anyone's vision. And that's the whole point of what we do. We just want to make it presentable, want to make the best product possible. And again, you talk to Rin and she writes horror. And I think it's an interesting, her description of it. You get a inspiration and then you just write down what you see in your head. And I think it takes special talent to write like mystery and horror. because as you go through your day and you think to yourself, like on a hike, what would make this hike terrifying if
Mhm.
I had to describe a scene? Crack of the branch behind me, a gust of wind, if you like supernatural. And I think it's an interesting horror writers and mystery writers are a different breed. And because they have that always in the back of their mind, what would make this terrifying? Like what would make this interview terrifying? A hand behind Steve's neck, a shadow that passes behind him. And then the brain works that way. And I think it's always fascinating when that's transferred into an actual book form.
I guess you have to be wired that way, and maybe it comes from all the stuff you've seen, all that you've watched. It's almost that was like if you're an Olympic athlete, that was your training for writing the book, if you will. Wow. That's so interesting. Rin, got to ask, Rin, where'd that come from?
I think I just grew up obviously reading a lot of horror, watching a lot of horror. It got to a point where I kind of expected every story to become a horror story. But also I think just growing up very anxious, where kind of expecting the worst case scenario at any moment, and then just sort of playing into that imagination and being like, well, what would be the worst case scenario?
I was
And
actually
then
asking how you got your name. And then it turned into a horror story. I'm like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
what?
turn to a horror story.
Is Rin, is there a significance there at all? Family name, something?
Yeah, it's just a nickname from when I was a kid
Oh,
that's
cool.
just
Okay.
stuck.
It's unique. It stands out. Love it. Wow.
Thank you.
What advice would you give anybody, young, old, if they were pondering writing a book, whether it's fiction, whether it's horror, whether it's a self-help book, anything? What advice would you give them?
A piece of advice I got when I first started writing this was write what you love and don't make it a chore. So if you're writing any kind of book, write the bit that you want to write. And if you get to a scene that's difficult or you kind of feel like you're forcing it or you feel like you're falling out of love with it, just write the next thing you want to write and then figure out later.
Hmm. And that's pretty much in line what you said before, where you just feel it, you see it. To you, this is real. This story is real, reasonably speaking, if you will. Where you just had to tell the story, which I think it's in your DNA, when you think of it that way. Fascinating talking about this. Mark, if somebody like Rin, like anybody is thinking about writing a book, what's the first step?
If you visit our website, nfbpublishing.com, there's a small form that starts the process.
Thank you both for today. Rin, I want to share, you're in England, aren't you?
Yes, I'm in Scotland right now.
Scotland. Okay, super cool. I learned a lot. I really did. And very refreshing about the whole process and how this all came together. Thank you both for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.